Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. Hey, everybody. Here again today. I always say I'm excited, but I think I'm a little bit partial to this one in particular. Today, we're speaking with a husband, a father who's pediatrician, who is a pediatrician, practicing pediatrician in Detroit, Michigan. His professional training has led him from his childhood home in Dallas to train in Phoenix and now to Michigan. We were just talking about this before we got on. I'm actually from Michigan, so we got a lot to talk about. In 2021, this is exciting. He created Docs2Dads, a podcast that helps men discover the joy of fatherhood and bring just some expertise into their own lives and health for their children as well, too, kind of establishing this balance that doesn't get talked about a lot. Since becoming a father himself in 2017, he's dedicated his time to supporting dads in their pursuit of fulfilling professional and family lives. Everybody, please welcome Dr. Scott Grant. How are you doing today, man?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me on your pod. This is really exciting.
Very cool. So you've got your own podcast. I was getting a little exciting in the introduction here just because I've got so much to talk about.
Yeah.
And you've laid this out. First of all, coming from somewhere where it's warm to warm and then now to Michigan. Tell me a little bit about that because you follow the medicine, right?
That's exactly right. I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there listening who are currently living in a city that they never ever dreamed they would ever live in.
Yeah.
And that's me as well. And that's the way medical training works. So I moved from Texas to Phoenix to do my residency. So I did my residency in pediatrics at Phoenix Children's Hospital and stayed on for a chief year there. But I am involved in a 2-physician marriage. So my wife, who is now a practicing ophthalmologist, had to go through her version of the match, which is its own separate animal, as anyone out there who's in ophthalmology knows. And so you have to apply wherever you can apply. I think that's true not just of ophthalmology, but for a lot of fields today. And my father-in-law grew up in Michigan, so my wife spent some time as a kid up here coming to visit in the summers, and so she knew how beautiful the Michigan summers are, which is true, which we're living through one of those right now. It's been a beautiful stretch of a couple of weeks here where the weather's perfect and we aren't inside at all because we just spend all day, every day outside, which is really nice. But it comes with the winters, which is not something I ever thought I would be signing up for. But you sign up for the journey when you go into medicine.
Very interesting. So, and I've a lot of physicians and a lot of listeners can probably agree with me on that you're not alone when there's a 2-physician marriage, huh? And that not only, that's got to complicate things even more, huh?
Sure. Yeah. I think we had it slightly easier than most because we were offset by a couple of years. So I'm a couple of years ahead of my wife. We met while we were in medical school. When she started as a first year. And so we had a little bit more flexibility in that sense because we weren't trying to match. I have the deepest amount of empathy for people who are trying to couples match and having to strategize, what cities do we want to live in and how do we rank programs both within cities, but then overall, it seems like a terrible amount of calculus that I, even with a math degree, do not feel qualified to do. So we had it comes with some challenges too, because we were offset and we didn't have that sort of couples match as close to a guarantee as you can get. We were long distance for the 3 years that I was in Phoenix. My wife was, in El Paso, Texas for the first 2 years and Seattle, Washington doing a research job for a year in between medical school and residency. And so, it came with its own sort of set of challenges, but you make it work. I'm very lucky to have her as my wife and my life partner. And, we're taking on the world together. We're trying to build this life together. And I think if you keep that perspective in mind, then it makes some of the other challenges a little bit easier, maybe.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting in the relationships I pull out of my mind and that similar kind of dynamic of, hey, where do we go? And you had made a comment before we started recording, Scott, about turning the meter down to about 97 or 94% every once in a while. But when you have two people in the relationship that have that kind of drive, it's difficult, right? And then we're talking about long distance relationships. So already, Scott, you've won an award for this husband piece, and hopefully your wife would say the same thing, being able to stay focused and build that relationship even with all those challenges at hand.
Yeah, I think you make it a priority if it's important, and yeah, like to sort of give a little more context to that, we were talking about sort of how do you find this balance between your professional life and your home life, and part of that is giving yourself permission to turn your ambition down from the 110 usually down to just like 97%, 94%, to say, like, where can we still accomplish our big dreams together? And don't get me wrong, we have big dreams that we want to accomplish together, my wife and I, and independently, professionally. But how can we put those like personal, professional ambitions inside our family ambitions? And like, what do we want not only for ourselves with our relationship, but now we have 3 kids. And so how do we how do we make sure that we're building a life that not only helps us live meaningful and satisfied lives, but also puts them in a position to grow and develop and be successful and emotionally well-regulated, and all the things that we think about as parents too.
So I'm going to get into that. And I'd mentioned like this idea of the goal is there, but making sure that we're enjoying the journey. And when we talk about kids and family and all these important things, one of the most important things that kind of led you on this path anyway is why you became a doctor. I mean, what was that turning point for you that said, Scott, this is what you're going to do with your life?
Yeah, I think my journey to being a doctor sort of starting with wanting to be a pediatrician. I think I wanted to be a pediatrician before I knew that meant I had to go to medical school. I just had a really close relationship with my own doctor growing up, and he was not a pediatrician. Actually, he was a family medicine doctor, but I have always enjoyed, volunteering in my church with some of the young kids. My parents, when I was growing up, used to teach the like preschool Sunday school class. And once I got old enough to not be in my own class, I sort of joined their class as a teen helper, and just really thought that was so fun to like get in there and play with those 3 and 4-year-olds and like help them, learn about life in that way. And that really led me down a path towards like, this is really what I want to do. I want to help kids like be healthy and happy. And I had sort of a natural talent, I think, for math and science, as many of us do, and sort of felt very natural to try to put those things together in a career in pediatrics. That sort of started me down that journey, and then sort of built it backwards from there to figure out like, what do I need to do to get to medical school? And then what do I need to do to get into a pediatrics residency successfully?
So a little reverse engineering. And you had an idea in medicine, a focus, and you took it all the way to fruition too. So I hear a lot where we have this idea of what we want to do in medicine, and then you go through the education career and it kind of shifts and changes until your final thing, but you started and finished with that. I wanted to mention for all the listeners who are out there in med school with the 2-physician relationship, there is hope, there is light. Hang with it. I know it's challenging, but it's so cool to see it. And Scott, you are a perfect example of that. And even in the long-term relationship side of it, until those equations and opportunities cross paths again, where you can be together, that just hold on to it and just keep working. So I think that's great. So you've become this a pediatrician, and now you have got a wife that's an ophthalmologist. So what's the biggest challenge for you guys right now? Because you have 4, right? I saw a picture on your Instagram, which is Docs2Dad pod, right? Mm-hmm. That there was 3. But do you have 4 kids now?
No, we just had our 3rd. So our youngest is just months, actually. So I've got a little boy who's almost 5, a little girl who's almost 3, and then the 9-month-old little boy. We did have a miscarriage first, which I know is something that affects a lot of other folks. So I sometimes will privately talk about how we have 4 kids, but that gets confusing depending on whether I want to have that conversation.
Right.
I do when I do public facing things, do try to mention that if it comes up, because there's so many people who feel alone and isolated when they have a miscarriage. And especially, I think as medical people, we feel like we should be immune from bad medical things happening to us. And it turns out that that's not really the case. But so we do have the 3 kids with us now.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. I know that personally it is something that's tough to talk about and a whole nother idea. But we are here where we're supposed to be doing what we're supposed to be doing. So that's part of the journey. And I know that keeps a lot of people from even trying, is being scared of falling. So you've got the 3 kids and a wonderful wife. And what is the biggest challenge that you guys face right now as a family?
I think the biggest thing for us is sort of the schedule and the time, and sort of the time limited experience that we have, and just trying to make sure that we're being intentional with the time that we do have, and that we're setting aside time specifically to spend with each other, me and my wife, as well as all together as a family. We also try to prioritize every once in a while spending time with each of the parents, with each of the kids, at least for a few minutes. Less important with the baby right now, although he's the easiest one to get one-on-one time. Yeah. He takes naps, and so you escape upstairs and you snuggle him for a few minutes while he falls asleep, and that's really nice. But we all, we try to just do that intentionality, and the schedules get busy, and we're home later, and the kids got to go to bed, and we got to have dinner, and there's all these other things that are going on. And I know we're actually in an easier phase of that part of life, because when we come home at the end of the day, we don't have anything else to go and do. And almost 5-year-old, I'm sure soon we're going to be thinking about, T-ball and Boy Scouts and all the other things, that extracurricular activities that kids start getting involved in. But I think we're trying to be really intentional with the time element, because you realize you don't, all of these days, you just don't get them back. And so the more you can sort of intentionally spend time with your wife and with your kids, the more meaningful that becomes.
I just, the recording that we did is probably going to air probably just before this, Scott. I was speaking with a physician. He was telling me that there is makes me want to mention it to you, especially this particular case with Docs2Dads too. It's a blog by Tim Urban. And the specific one is entitled The Tail End. And it makes me think about this, because the amount of time that you spend with your children, I think, I don't know, I'm paraphrasing. It was like 75 or 95% of that time is up until they graduate high school.
Right.
That's like a substantial amount of time. So being able to enjoy that time with them now is crucial. Yeah. And with 2 physicians in the house, time being the biggest challenge. And I mean, you made a couple suggestions. I'm sure you talk about this a lot on your podcast, and on your Instagram, of finding that way to set that as a priority, to make sure that, that you're able to enjoy the time that we have, and enjoy the journey, and being present in the moment is super, super important.
Yeah. I think that, I'm sorry. Do you want to?
No, go ahead.
I sort of break this down in a couple of different ways. So, one is sort of the big picture. So I think every year, my wife and I try to sit down at the beginning of the year, or close to the, at holiday time is usually a nice time to think about this, and sort of plan out, like, what do we want the next year to look like? Because if we're both going to take a whole week of vacation, or sometimes multiple weeks of vacation at the same time, the sooner we can schedule that, the easier it's going to be. And so we try to every year take at least one trip that's a multi-night trip. That's just my wife and I, and we make arrangements to like fly in grandparents or whatever else might need to happen, so that we can get away for at least for a long weekend somewhere, and just like reconnect with one another. And kind of, that's where we do some of our like big picture family goal setting, and kind of where do we think we're going to go. And then a week of vacation that we're going to dedicate to the whole family going somewhere. And so like this year, for example, next month, we're really excited. We're going to be going up to the Boundary Waters of Minnesota at a little family camp up there, and just like spending some time away from the hustle and bustle, and just kind of being all together with some of my wife's extended family. And so we're really looking forward to that. But we had to make that decision like a year ago. And so the further out you can plan that, the easier that becomes. And so it seems really fantastical sometimes when I tell people that, like, oh, wife and I are going away for a week. We're going to go take a cruise or something. And they're like, oh, I don't know how you pull that off. And I was like, well, it's because we planned it 8 months ago, and if you wait until like, oh, we should do something next month, like it's really hard to throw all that together in that short of a timeline. Every once in a while you can, depending on like what your support is and those kinds of things. But the more intentional you can be, the easier that becomes. And then the other thing is to think about, so that's like the big picture. And then the other thing is like the day-to-day things. And my favorite like little practical tip that I'm talking about right now all the time is I've set a feature on my phone every night between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. I don't get any alerts from any of my like apps or any of that kind of stuff during that window of time, because that's the time that we're going to be cooking dinner, eating dinner, getting ready for bed, spending time together as a family, and then getting my kids in bed. And I don't want to be distracted. So there's a very short list of people that can like send me a text or send me a call during that window, but everything else is blocked in that time period. And I've actually missed a meeting because of that. But that's the price that I pay. I try to be more aware of what might be happening. But for the most part, that's been really well serving, because most of those alerts, especially in the evening time, are like sports scores or like other things that aren't more important than being with my family. And so I'd say those are the two things. Like one is the big picture, and the other is sort of these little day-to-day things that you can do to just remove the distractions, of which our cell phone is like the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like the top 12 distractions in your life are all on your cell phone. And so if you can just get it away, and now I'm even starting to try to just put my phone upstairs while I'm, downstairs with the kids, like just don't even have it around, because it's like, we get addicted, right? We want to go and grab it and do something with it. And so the more we can sort of depart from that, the better off it'll be.
Yeah, that's great advice. And to me, it's like turning this idea. I come from like the personal development world, and that's basically like a personal development plan, financial plan, having a family plan where you're intentional, you're setting the stuff out, you're designing your year off of the most important pieces first, and everything else has to fit in. And Scott, the same way with work, like I've gone through, this change in my life where, my cell phone, like emails, like I don't look at emails anymore. My team does that, and I use Slack. And then certain times of the day I was checking Slack. And my voicemails got to a point where they were full and nobody could leave a voicemail. I was like, okay, and then they would send a text or something and like, hey, your voicemail is full. It's like, yes, I know. Thank you. So if the back in the days where we used to pick up the phone and call somebody, right? If you needed to connect with somebody, you just pick up the phone and call. Just that alone would change your life drastically too. So I get to it being virtual with our staff is, emails back and forth, especially somebody outside of our circle. 15 emails back and forth. And it's like one 5-minute phone call would have resolved all of that. And guess what? That phone call would have not have happened at 6 to 8 in the evening either. That's what happened when it was supposed to happen. So great advice. I absolutely love that. And just basically turning that and being intentional, because, you always hear that time is the most valuable thing in your life, right? Mm-hmm. Scott, I have something bigger than that. And it's attention is the most valuable thing in life, because if I give you my time from 6 to 8, Scott, and you don't have my attention, you don't have anything. And that phone is just a black hole of attention, and there are billions and billions of dollars spent to grab your attention, to keep your attention. And by shutting those notifications off, even minimizing apps, getting it out of the way, because guess what? You're with the most important things in your life at that moment, and you designing your life off of those things and filling everything else in, I think is a great approach.
Yeah, it's been huge for us. And my wife and I try to be really intentional nicely about reminding each other when we're on our phones and we should not be. So I'm, that's a thing that we try to be really intentional about, because like you said, you're absolutely right. Attention is, we use time, I think, as a proxy for attention. But what we really mean is, like, if I'm with my kids, it's the same thing too. The other thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is, you take your kids to the park or something, and like how many of the parents that are there at the park are like actively engaged in what their kids are doing, like pushing their kids on the swing or climbing on things. The majority of them are like sitting, they're not even talking to each other. It'd almost be better if they were like talking to each other, but they're like on their phone doing things. And it's like, how often was that me, right? That's me sometimes too. So I've been thinking a lot more about trying to be intentional when I take my kids to the park, when we're doing something. Like I'm there at the park with them. That's not like, the park's not a babysitter.
Yep.
I'm there to be with them. And if I'm not, then I need to be doing something differently.
And it gives me goosebumps. Like one of the first times that I was intentional, my daughter was in gymnastics, and you're right. And for all the listeners out there, both Scott and I are like doing the phone thumb thing, as we're going through this. And like, I would look beside, and there may be 8 parents there, and all of them are on their cell phones, not paying attention. And I watch as their kids look up and look and look and never connect. But when my daughter looks at me and she connects with me, Scott, man, I mean, for the both of us in the neuroscience world, this rush, just this huge connection. And it was so easy, Scott. All I had to do was put my phone down.
Just put your phone
focused. Down. Yeah. I mean, there's so much value in that. And it's just the attention. That's the most valuable thing. So now with this going forward, being intentional, have this path, being focused on the family, with the 2 physicians in the house. Tell me a little bit about like where the goals take you guys with, and I'm going to push into investing just a little bit here, because time is so important, right? But the ability to focus our attention during that time is really important. So we know that the business that we're doing is trading time for money. So what are some of the ways that you've looked at, hey, how can we step away from this? How can we prepare ourselves to be more intentional on where our attention goes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that we talk about quite a lot, and we're still sort of getting started on our investment journey, but it's definitely one of the things that we've been talking about more, is how do we make sure, like right now, while we're relatively young, that we're, maxing out any kind of retirement investment accounts that we have available to us, so that we can start putting some of that away and being able to use that later. Do we want to start, my wife is really interested in things like real estate and those kinds of things. We're not quite there yet to be able to really start doing that in a real way, but we're hopeful that within the next little while, we'll be able to start doing that, just to give you that little bit of margin and that sensation. I think we both love our jobs. And I think that's the hard thing sometimes about the way this conversation happens
between the two
physicians.
Of you, or between outside?
No, like if you're part of this ecosystem,
right.
A little bit, as somebody who has, followed folks like, White Coast Investor and Peter Kim and all these other guys who are doing great work to help people. There's a lot of focus, I feel like, sometimes on like, you got to quit the daily grind and like get out of there and, go sit on a beach somewhere and drink a Mai Tai. And like, that sounds nice. Like that would be good for me for like 3.5 days. And then I'm like, all right, can I get back to doing what I feel called to do? Right. And so I definitely see my work as a pediatrician that way. And my wife, the same with her ophthalmology gig. So I think there is this like balance to be struck between like, we have these skills and we have this service that we're able to provide, and hopefully we love providing it. And my wife and I are certainly lucky to be in that category, but also sort of giving ourselves the flexibility to be able to say, like, there are going to be really important moments in our lives and in our kids' lives, and we need to make sure that we're in a position where we can be present intentionally for those moments. And so whether that means, having some flexibility to take some more prolonged vacations, right? So we can take our kids overseas and visit like places, go to, Europe, go to the Holy Land, go to all these, cool places that are out there to be seen. And our kids will learn so much just from going there and seeing these things, and so I think we think more about it sometimes in that sense than like, when can we get to the point that we want to quit our jobs? Because we don't really want to live in that space, but we do want to make sure that we're set up for success in the long run, and at a point where we're doing the jobs that we love because we love them, and not necessarily because we are, we have to, right? We don't want to end up in a golden handcuff situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned White Coat Investor, great spot. Jim Dolly, Dolly is his name.
Yeah.
Great podcast, great spot, great reference. They do a seminar conference every year. I think it's called WCI Con.
Yeah.
That's also interesting. So great spot. That's and they're going to pick across, a bunch of different platforms. Some of the investing is in syndications, providing insurance resources, all this stuff. You mentioned real estate. Where would you start? Because, if you don't come from a real estate background, how do you even start? I want to invest in real estate, but my focus is on medicine. What should I do?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of resources that are available out there, and there's a lot of folks, especially in the physician real estate crossover game, which I know is a place that I think you spend some time as well. And so there's a lot of resources out there to start thinking about. I think the first question that you want to ask yourself, from what I'm certainly at the beginning of this journey. No,
we love it. We love it. It's
how hands-on do you want to be, right? Exactly. So, I know folks, I have a colleague of mine that I work very closely with. She's a very good friend. And she and her husband are both physicians, but they are all in on the real estate thing. She loves it. And so they are actively buying things to turn into short-term rentals that are little getaways. And she's talking about developing a whole brand around this concept that'll be sort of separate from VRBO or some of these other things, right? And so she wants to be in it. She wants to be up there, and her husband wants to be the one who's doing the painting and doing all the things. And so for some people, they love that and they enjoy it and they think it's fun. They're regular Chip and Joanna Gaines, but that is not possible or practical for some folks. Might just not be what you want to do. And so there's different stages along the way. You can, invest in a house that has a little bit less work, that you need to do. So you're thinking more about long-term rental kind of situation where you're not renting it out quite so frequently. You're not having to go every 3 or 4 days and turn the house over and make it look nice again. Then there's all kinds of, investments that you can join into that are part of larger investment groups, like syndications, where there's an organization, one group that I know of that does this, that's led by a physician, is Viking Capital is one to explore if that's something you're into. They buy huge apartment buildings, and you can buy in for a certain small amount to buy a share of that apartment building, and you get a kickback from that once they sort of turn it around and sell it or get whatever income comes in from that.
Yep.
I think the least hands-on version of that is sort of getting involved in real estate funds that you just sort of invest in the same way that you do with mutual funds and other kinds of things. There's some overlap on some of these things. So if, there's middle between those, but those are kind of the big things. And the big question is how much time do you have that you want to dedicate to this? Because there's some real tax want to really jump all the way in, or if you have a partner who's not in medicine or who's interested in retiring from medicine, to be able to go become a real estate professional, and then you can write off some of the depreciation on your taxes and some of those kinds of things. I'm not an expert in any of that, but you can learn all of that from folks that do this all the time, to sort of very passive opportunities for investment as well.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And with the idea of, how much time do you want to, or do you have, or do you want to put into this? What I tell everybody is aligning your values and your time, selecting that goal or that outcome that you want that aligns exactly with what you want to put into it. You're not looking to buy yourself another job, and more power to the person that wants to paint the walls, because it's not a solution that works for them, but I don't want to do that. I don't mind painting a wall or mowing the lawn or whatever it is, but that's not what I want to feel like I have to do. That golden handcuff for that one. I don't want to buy another job.
Right.
So the other challenge is, how much time can you put into learning? And that's one of the biggest challenges we have coming, that I'm seeing on the front side of it, because you're already busy. If I have to carve out time for my family, how in the world am I going to carve out time to learn how to invest into real estate? Right. So that's a challenge, and kind of tippy-toeing into different areas. You've got a partner. What I hear, what's it? Tag-along investing happens a lot, where Dr. Joe did it this way. It worked, so I'm going to do it this way. So I see a lot of that tag-along stuff, syndication, stuff like that. So yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. The one thing I do want to mention is, if anybody is interested in learning more, there's great feedback around Bigger Pockets. And why I say Bigger Pockets is because the first thing you have to decide is, where is the time going to be? What are you going to be doing in the relationships? What are you looking for? So just the time to kind of figure out that question first. Bigger Pockets would be a great spot because it's a forum of talking. It's a forum of resources. And
then they do everything.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you want to be, how involved or not involved you want to be, there's going to be a forum there. There's going to be a podcast episode there, for podcast listener types who are listening to this. They have tons of good content out there as well. It's not physician specific, but I think in some ways that's useful because you're hearing it from real estate professionals. And I think hearing how real estate professionals talk about this is different from how physicians talk about this, even those have been in the real estate game for a while. And so, I would co-sign that. And I think you just have to decide, do you want to be somebody who is primarily, making decisions and, funding the operation? Or do you want to be somebody who's trying to sell the house and drumming up interest and actively involved in the buying and selling and flipping of whatever kind of real estate you're going to be working on? And there's of interest in all of those things. I'm not particularly handy. I wish that I was. So if and when we get to the point,
careful what you wish for, you might wind up painting walls.
Yeah, I might.
All right.
I might. Painting walls, I think I could handle, but too much more complicated than that. Then I would need a YouTube video to teach me how to do it.
Yeah, but absolutely. I mean, right on the nose. The white coat investor, great spot. Bigger Pockets we talked about. Obviously, Physician Wealth Systems, we got a ton of stuff as well too. I live, breathe, eat, sleep. This is all that I do. It's right down my lane. And one of the biggest things that I always say is, hey, this is what works for me. Doesn't mean you have to do it. Doesn't mean you can't do this other thing, right? Just because I'm doing this asset class doesn't mean that you have to do it, or I wouldn't point you in this direction. If you want to do a syndication, I'd point you into this direction, right? But I always love, thank you for giving me that feedback of where you're at as a physician and figuring this out, because it's so important to see. That's one of those things that's untalked about, right? We know that we have to invest. Mm-hmm. We know that's how we can focus more of our time. Not that, that we're in the never retire class. I see myself the same way. I'm going to be busy because I am passionate about what I do. Mm-hmm. But where do we start? Where does that, and then we get into trust. I mean, who do we trust? How do we know that in the tag along, that's one of the biggest pieces in the tag along investing is the trust, right? It's already performed. But just out to the listeners, no matter what you're doing out there, there's always risk. And whenever anything is mentioned as guaranteed as an investment, you should turn and run, because they're not telling you the truth. Even if it's a good person, a good outfit, guaranteed is just not something you do. Even if I give you, we worked private mortgage or private lenders. That's how I started working with physicians. Mm-hmm. We were flipping houses. So we've built relationships with physicians. They would lend money on the deal, lend for the purchase and the renovation. So there'd be a mortgage, a promissory note. They'd be listed on the insurance as additional payee. Even with all of that, it's still not guaranteed. Right? It's risk adjusted return, but it's not guaranteed. Very interesting. Yeah. So a circle. Yeah, but you have something to say on that, Greg?
Yeah, I was just gonna sort of say related to things that we don't talk about and making it work for you. I think that's the piece. Is I think you have to really look inside yourself, and if you have a partner, have a deep conversation with them about what do you want this to look like. And almost any answer is fine as long as it's going to work for you. And it's what you want to do. And so if you don't care about real estate at all and you want to go invest in something totally different from real estate, that's fine. I think that's a really popular pathway for a lot of physicians for a variety of reasons. And there's good things about real estate investing, but it's not the only thing in the universe to invest in. And if you want to be really involved and that's something that you want to do, then that's great. But if you don't have time for that, or if you feel like you're trying to balance that with family things that you need to do, and that's clearly much more important, then you might only have time right now to dedicate to doing some kind of syndication or something that's a little less involved right now, and then somewhere down the road. But the more you can learn, the more you'll learn what your options are. I think the other thing that happens, I think this happens in medicine too, where you think if you go into general surgery, there's one life that a general surgeon lives. And the reality is there's a million different possible careers that you can have from a general surgery residency. And I know that's true for pediatrics. And I know it's true for a lot of other fields. And so you really can, more than we let on, mold this career and your life more broadly into what it is that you want it to look like if you're intentional about it and you think about like, what do I want? How do I want this life that we're building to look? And I think that's the most important thing, is try not to just stumble from one thing to the next, but like really think about what's our path forward.
That is perfect. I mean, that aligns with everything from the self-development to the family, being intentional and learning what the options are. So setting out, say, maybe even in this first year, if I'm saying, hey, this year, I'm going to keep tucking away, which is a great idea, tucking in the 401ks because it's probably being matched. Mm-hmm. So that's a great return already, right? I'm going to keep tucking this away, but this year I'm going to look into A, B, and C, right? Yeah. And you'll notice that when you focus that attention on these certain things, something's going to get legs. And when I say legs, there's going to be a relationship. There's going to be either a tag along option. There's going to be something, or just a epiphany for you. It's like, oh, I see this now. Because let me tell everybody out there that as a physician, you've done some hard work to get to where you're at. Let me tell you, this other side of investing is not complicated. It is not. When it gets too complicated, maybe that's not the right deal. If you're building out these syndications, partners, preferred payouts, all this kind of stuff, maybe that's just not the right answer, So I can tell you from my own experience that you have what it takes to find the information you need to make an educated decision, hands down. And
absolutely, totally agree.
Yeah, I think not the time thing or whatever. It's you have what it takes. You just need to focus the attention on it and be intentional.
Yeah, if you decide that's what you want to do, the resources are there, and it's definitely doable. I think that's a place where my wife and I have spent some time, and we'll every once in a while still send like podcast episodes back and forth. We've kind of put a pause on that on our plan for right now for a variety of reasons. But I know that we're hopeful that within the next couple of years, we're going to be start thinking really intentionally about getting some kind of additional property or something like that to be able to rent out. We're still trying to figure out what the best move for us is. Mm-hmm. But I spent basically especially during the pandemic when I had a little more time on my hands, I spent basically all of 2021 just consume as much content as I could around real estate investing and what does it look like for physicians to invest in real estate? What are the different kinds that we can do? And so now I feel like I have a much better picture of that. So when we get to the point that we're going to try to execute on that, then we know what to do. I've built out some spreadsheets for myself and stolen some things from other folks, free resources that are available that you can find online, and just played around with them. And I even like here in our local market, like hypothetically, if we were going to try to get a rental home, like just sort of analyze some deals, like, well, what kind of offer would I need to be able to make on that house to make it work for the rent that I think I could get for it? And that might seem really intimidating to you if you haven't taken the first step. But if you can spend some time, give yourself a little time to learn as much as you can, then you'll get to a point where you can sort of do that as like a side thing. As a
byproduct of Physician Wealth Systems, we've created this platform called the Real Estate Residency, and it kind of touches on all of this stuff. It touches on what type of solution am I looking for? How much time can I put to it? Is it aligned with my values? And then what is a deal? How can I tell where to get a deal? And then the spreadsheets that you're talking about, completely free. So there's that resource that's out there.
So you don't even have to make your own.
Yeah, right. It's already out there. Yeah, 100%. The biggest thing that I'm hearing, though, too, it makes me think of analysis paralysis. We can only prepare for so long, then you have to take action. Because I don't care how many books you read, it doesn't become wisdom until it's action. You have to take action. With all of this that we've talked about, Scott, if you could look back 10 years, 15 years ago, what was something that you would tell yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me personally, I think that my journey has been one of the big challenges that I've had is sort of taking my own physical health and not prioritizing that enough at various stages of my life to set me up for long-term success in that realm. And so I think that if I could go back, 10 or 15 years, I would, implore myself to make sure that I always made time to take care of my physical health, because if you don't have that, then so many other things to fall apart very quickly, and you don't have the time to dedicate to any of this stuff, right? And I don't have time to spend with my wife, and I don't have time to spend with my kids because I'm not in good health and those kinds of things. And thankfully, I'm not at that point yet, and I'm trying to make up for lost time now. But I think that's another thing that we sometimes forget about as we're trying to like build our career and build our life. It's like one other thing to add into that equation, but it's such an important piece, and I'm certainly not doing this perfectly now. I'm still trying to figure out like, how do I fit in my life with my wife and my 3 kids, time job? Like, how do I get in, at least 3 hours a week of some kind of, strenuous exercise? And how do I get in a couple of sessions a week or some weightlifting to make sure my strength is staying up and those kinds of things that are associated with longevity. I've been like sort of reading some of the stuff that Dr. Peter Attia has been doing lately around and those kinds of things. And so, that's sort of fresh on my mind right now, maybe as I'm thinking about this. But I think we also can't forget that we have to take care of ourselves physically and mentally, which is a whole other conversation. Yeah. But I think that's the place where I think I've set myself up as well as I could have related to like finances and saving and those kinds of things, and have made some good choices along the way. Maybe I could have done better. I think the one place where I wish I'd spent more time was on my physical health. I'm having to make up for that now.
There's always so much meaning to that first thing that pops in your mind. There's a little bit of silence there when I asked that question, and I could see you drawing, like, okay, what is this? But that hits you instantly, and it means so much. So what popped into my mind on this is taking care of your health is, no matter what we talk about investment wise or preparing for the future, or how much we build time or attention or any of that, there's no wealth if we don't have health. So there's that rhyming thing that you always remember. And it made me remember Ed Milet talking about a way to anchor this for him. And one of the things that means the most to him, I share this as well too, is my daughter. And walking my daughter down the aisle. Just think of all these things. I could prepare and build the best, biggest wedding and give the greatest gifts and all of this stuff. But if my health is not there, if I'm not there to walk her down that aisle, then what does that leave me, right? Yeah. So it's that idea of you've got to take care of yourself. It's a massive, massive point. And the last thing I would add to that, Scott, is a couple of years ago, my life changed drastically in the personal development world. It's about 2 years ago. And the biggest trigger, believe it or not, was something called 75 Hard. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
75 Hard. So this is very interesting. And it's one of those things, like if there's anybody out there listening that has thought about this, heard about it, you can't think about it. Like as soon as you find out what it is, you got to do it. And it's 75 days of these certain things, right? You got to drink a gallon of water. You got to read 10 pages nonfiction. You have to follow a diet. It can be any diet. You have to follow a diet. There's no alcohol, no cheat meals. And then you have to take a picture of yourself every single day for 75 days. If you miss one of them, you start over. But just imagine this. If health is a priority, look at those things that you have to do in that. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one. You have to exercise 45 minutes twice, 2 separate times, 45 minutes every single day. So if health is something you focus on, imagine that what you're forcing yourself to do by checking off the day every single day, and you got to start over if you miss something. Because now, as I went through that, Scott, I started juggling. I was busy. I'm busy. You're busy. How do I fit 45-minute exercises in a day? Well, guess what? When we started doing this, my kids got new bikes. Like we found reasons to be together as we exercised because I had to. I had to exercise to get this done. That was massive. Following a diet, I lost 40 pounds the first time I did 75 Hard. I've been through all the phases. Like it's remarkable. So if there's anybody out there, take a look at it. Don't let it scare you. You will find a way to fit this in. And the cool part is you start multitasking, but in a way that allows you to give the attention where it should be. Not like multitask. I can do 4 things at one time, but I'm going to go for a walk. And today I'm going to spend that walk with my 8-year-old and give them 45 minutes of pure attention. Yeah. And I'm going to treat myself well. I'm going to eat right. I'm a gallon of water, man, it's massive. It's just huge. 75 hard, Scott. What do you think?
All right. I'll have to look into that. That sounds
Come on, don't let it
interesting.
scare
I gotta
you.
get my I'm not scared. I gotta it sounds like something you need your wife to sign off on.
Oh, absolutely. She has to do it too. Yeah.
Oh,
and
is that it?
my wife made it through the first time. It took me my third time. I finally made it. I got to day 30 and I missed my pages. I think I missed reading my 10 pages. So if I got off schedule, it was hard. So I related that to, hey, it's not the 10 pages I'm supposed to read for this challenge. This is 10 pages maybe that I should have read to my kids, where I wasn't focusing my time where it needed to be, right?
Right.
And day 60 on the second time, I forgot my picture. Man,
oh
so I had to start over. But again, I just anchored that, Scott. I anchored it back to where this is not about a picture with 75 hard or a challenge. This is a picture that maybe I missed with my kids because my focus was somewhere else.
Right.
Right. So just help me to reset. And if any listeners out there, take the challenge, keep us in the loop on this. I challenge you. I know it's going to be difficult, especially with the difficult medical schedules. Absolutely. But it's possible. Yeah. Just like focusing, being intentional with your family 1 year out, being intentional with your partner 1 year out, and setting those big boulders in place. And then everything else is just sand that fills in. Scott, it's been absolutely wonderful chatting with you today. Today, I feel like I did more talking than listening. I'm sorry about that.
No, this is a great conversation. I hope your audience has taken something away from this, the way that we think about planning our lives intentionally, whether that's in our personal lives, our professional lives, taking care of ourselves. I think that's, at the heart of what we're all trying to do. And certainly at the heart of what I'm trying to do with Docs2Dads is to get dads to think about their relationship with their wives and their kids more intentionally, so that they can have a fulfilling home and professional life. And I'm really grateful to be here with you today.
Awesome. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And the listeners out there, check out the podcast, Docs2Dad Pod, right? That's what it's called. And
on Instagram, it's at Docs2Dads Pod. DOCS, the number 2 DADS pods, pod, excuse me, that one's singular, or at Docs2Dads.com.
Docs2Dads.com. DOCS, the number 2 DADS.com.
That's right.
Perfect. Reach out, any questions, give a listen to the podcast. If there's anybody out there currently with children, thinking about having children and taking care of yourself a little better, because without health, we have no wealth, right?
No wealth without health.
That's right. That's right. And focus in. I think I just love that. I just leave this one on the tune of being intentional. And our attention is where the value is at. So be intentional with your attention, turning the phones off, being focused on the things that matter most to us. And even if they're a long ways away from you at the moment because you're two physicians early on in a relationship, hang in there, stay focused. If you have any questions for us, you can reach us at info@Physician Wealth Systems. Anything about the resources we talked about, we talked about White Coat Investor. We talked about Bigger Pockets. Any of those places, if you're looking for more information on investing, reach out. Like I say, if it has nothing to do with us, maybe it's a resource that we've got. I'd love to connect with you. Info@Physician Wealth Systems. And that's it, man. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We really appreciate it. Thanks again, Scott. And until the next one.